the same thing with George Floyd, but I think with George Floyd, it was the video on top of social media.
So it was the death of Floyd, and Rodney King survived his beating.
Oh yes, that's true.
But not to minimize any of this,
yeah,
because both of them were tragic. All of these situations were tragic.
Yeah.
And it just really, really was it's a dark story to tell. And the thing that's gnawing at many of us is the accountability piece.
Right.
Because Carol Bryant is still alive and nothing's happened to her at all.
Who is that?
Emmett Till's
no, she died.
Story.
Didn't she die? The woman whose hand? No, didn't she die a couple of years ago? And they said that she, on her deathbed, she said that she lied about him touching her.
Well, what happened was somebody interviewed her and put it in a book, and then the press started questioning: is this story true about Carol Bryant? Because she was still living and in her 80s. And she acknowledged that the story was misrepresented. And that's who I'm talking about. Yeah, and I believe she's still alive.
She's still alive? Really? Wow. Yeah. Okay, I'm renaming you, Claudia. Because we want you to get all your accolades.
Well, as we start on time, it is 6:02. Thank you. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m. we start You Be the Judge. As our partner Marilyn Pierre is getting us all straight with our names and things like that, and she keeps us on track, which I love because I'll go off the rails quick. And then we have the judge Claudia Barbara. We are just a spectacular team. I love it. I'm so glad that we've partnered up to do You Be the Judge. It's about information understanding, and hopefully you get an understanding to put yourself into an action. Because I kind of wrote today, I was writing these articles, people get bamboozled because they're so emotionally attached or detached, but they don't have the information. And if they have the information, they completely don't understand it. And then we're talking about legal issues. We're talking about stuff like, why didn't you do this? Why couldn't you do this? That we just don't know. And I'm glad to have two esteemed attorneys on here to say, and to pick through those weeds for you so you can say, well, did you do this? How about this? What's your next step? So thank you. My partner is Marilyn.
And you have more than two lawyers on here, and we're so glad about that. So, and a judge.
Well, I'm glad that Dr. Dyer explained in really relevant terms the fact that some issues and cases are complicated. Mm-hmm. And when we bring up the notion of understanding the judicial system, how it works, that's important. That's an important chunk right there. Now, both Marilyn Pierre and I came together because we both ran in contested judicial elections. And many of the voters are not familiar with how the contested judicial election system works. They don't understand it when they get their ballots. Not everybody, but some people don't understand why is it that certain judges on the appellate level were votes of yes and no, and then at the trial court level, it was pick one or two or three or four of the five or something to that degree. And it takes a piece of a long detailed explanation to go through every phase of how that came to be, and why voting for trial court judges is so important.
And why it is that when people try to amend the Maryland Constitution to keep people from voting for trial court judges, why we need to fight back against
we need to
that.
go back to the legislature and allow our voices to be heard. And don't be afraid to testify. before the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee or the House Judiciary Committee, you let them know that you care and you want to decide who your trial court judges are, and not some unelected judicial nominating commission that have already shown who they are. They practice exclusion. They practice exclusion not just of Hispanics, but in various counties. It's all about who you know, etc.
You mean they're not taking the new equality training and diversity that's going around? They won't take those classes.
Very interesting. I have not seen that is the case.
No.
These people are handpicked, and many of them are handpicked by the governor, and some are handpicked by bar associations. But the danger in that is that there's no accountability. There's no audit of what they do. If they have people on the commission that are ideologues, there's nothing to root that out. There's nothing to root out white nationalists. There's nothing to root out, their picks of people based on who they know versus the qualifications of the candidate. They don't use rubrics necessarily on a scale of 1 to 10 and then rank the applicants. Oftentimes it's all about who they know and who looks like them. What's scary? Who's going to be favorable?
But what's scary is if it's not so much who looks like them, but what policies they believe in also.
Right.
Because not everyone that looks like you is for you.
Exactly.
And
Glad you said that.
Yeah, man, we got to say that. But so let's look at some of the numbers, small numbers. 22 million people associate themselves with Nazism. Right? 22 million in the United States, not around the world. 22. 70 million people voted for the other guy. Right? Out of that other guy, 1 out of 10 people who don't consider themselves neo-Nazis, 1 out of 10 believe in neo-Nazis' views. That's roughly another 42 million people. That's a lot of people in places that you don't see, that you don't talk to, but they are moving this wheel of injustices against certain types of people. You know what I mean? They don't have to be out there protesting. They don't have to be out there doing anything else. As long as they put the right people in the right places, and the few of us who don't vote, we are then concerned, how did this happen? Well, you just explained how it happened. You're not understanding, you don't have enough information, and you're definitely not voting.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I think, I wouldn't be so upset about what they're doing in terms of putting whoever they want in there if the people were doing a good job. I mean, they're in there and they're doing a miserable job, and we are the ones who are suffering because of that. And that's why when people hear that Maryland incarcerates a higher percentage of its young black males than any other state, they're shocked by that. No matter how many times I say it, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe that. How did that happen? Well, that happens because you put a bunch of judges in there who give them excessive sentences and who don't see them as, human beings. They're like, oh, okay, well, we need some people to go to jail to work for 17 cents an hour. We don't mind the taxpayers paying $50,000 a year for, somebody to work for Starbucks or Victoria's Secrets or, a bunch of the other corporations that use prison labor.
The other thing is that I'm glad you touched on the point of sentencing, because I saw on Attorney Ben Crump's Facebook page just this week or even today a comparison of the person who spilled millions of sewage to make bad water in Flint, Michigan, got a 1-year jail sentence. Wow. And somebody who possessed marijuana, who was black and male, got a 25-year sentence. Wow. I mean, that's judges.
Wow.
That's the judicial system, and that's why it's so fundamentally important that we understand these judges and their sentencing records. And, there's a question as to whether or not someone that has a 15-year term and does disparate sentencing, it takes 15 years to get that person off the bench. Mm-hmm. That's a problem.
That's a problem.
Should the terms be 15 years or something shorter than that?
Well, if there's something egregious that a judge does, what is the way to get them out of the bench?
It's the Judicial Disabilities Commission, but those commissions are no more effective than the people that serve on them. I mean, because they can let a whole bunch of stuff slip and slide, and if somebody has the guts to go full throttle on a case, but there is something that I do subscribe to. I do subscribe to a newsletter that identifies judicial discipline actions all over the country from various jurisdictions and from various judges. And many times the trial judges are the ones that have a lot of complaints brought against them because that is the most active court, and they are oftentimes more interactive with the public, with jury trials, and a lot of them get slapped for their behavior on the bench. They talk nasty, rude to litigants, and often litigants complain of that. Because that is a major problem. People, tax dollars are supporting these courts.
Yes.
Tax dollars are. And when we stay focused on that issue, that's why I have no problem in applying for judicial vacancies because I'm entitled to apply for these positions as a member of the bar who's been practicing law for more than 5 years, who's over the age of 35, and has all of those constitutional requirements are what makes you eligible to appear on the ballot and to serve as a judge. So, it makes the case more difficult as to why people are excluded when they try to shortlist only 2 or 3 or 4 people, and all of a sudden the 4 people that you shortlist on the trial court judicial nominating commission situation just happens to be people who are of a specific race and sex. So that's something that has to be questioned. And the public has to be made fully aware of what's going on. Fully aware.
Yeah, Judge Barber, there's a question in the chat for you.
Mm-hmm.
Holly wanted to know if you could explain the judicial selections procedure.
Oh, well, that's a great question. The judicial selection procedure is outlined actually on the Maryland Courts.gov website, and there's a district court, there is a circuit court, there is a court of special appeals, and what recently passed is Maryland Supreme Court, but it was called the Court of Appeals of Maryland. So judges are generally in all of those specific state courts. Number one, judges cannot serve past the age of 70, so they have to be less than 70 years old. But the judges on the district court, on the circuit court, on the Court of Special Appeals, on the Court of Appeals, they are all appointed by the governor when a vacancy exists. But under Governor Marvin Mandel's administration, he put together what's called an executive order, just like President Trump signed executive orders. he put together an executive order that has been the model for other governors that sets up or establishes judicial nominating commissions in all of the counties to allow the governor to have picks on those judicial nominating commissions. And what those commissions do is they actually interview the applicants, and they shortlist the applicants based on whatever they say.
But before you continue, even the short list, I'm not going to talk about how did it get the list. Is that list viewable for the public?
Yes. Whenever a vacancy occurs, if you Googled Maryland judicial vacancies, you would be routed to a link of current judicial vacancies that have been publicized to the general public, and it identifies, what judge is stepping down or how the position became vacant. It could become vacant because of retirement. It could become vacant because another vacancy was created by statute, was allowed in the budget and created by statute. It could become vacant because of death, because of someone stepping down for other reasons, retiring early, before 70, etc. But the name of that person appears, and then it identifies the specific county that is at issue, or the circuit in the event it's at the circuit level. Now, the district court judges, which is the small claims court and landlord tenant court, when those judges do not run in contested judicial elections, but trial court judges at the circuit court level, they do and can run in, because every, vacancy and appointment that's filled may not result in a contested election. It's up to others to apply, file a certificate of candidacy, and run for a specific a seat on the circuit court in the county where that individual resides. So that's the reason why the trial court has this issue with contested judicial elections. But I don't agree that the Judicial Nominating Commission should have the final say on who your trial court judges are, because in the case of Anne Arundel County, for 368 years, they've never had an African-American female. Now, they've already shown you who they are. The Judicial Nominating Commission has just practiced exclusion up and down. And there's no accountability for that at all. So when I ran in 2016 for circuit court judge in Anne Arundel County, I was faced with that situation where many of us fully qualified, applied through the Judicial Nominating Commission process, and they just disregarded us and, went with, in the case in Anne Arundel County, that specific trial court was a segregated trial court from 2005 all the way up to 2017.
How can a court be segregated? How can a court be segregated?
It's segregated because the Judicial Nominating Commission is getting by with practicing exclusion. That's why it's segregated. They bypass every single opportunity to allow diversity on the bench, which is much needed, and just created a situation where they were only shortlisting whites only. And, just in your face, a situation from 2005 all the way up to 2017. People had to look at an all-white court, and they did this with no shame whatsoever. And Anne Arundel County is not the only county where that has happened. I'm sure there are other counties in the state of Maryland.
Hell, across the United States.
Yeah,
I'm sure across the United States.
Right. And so when a situation like that arises, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to let it sit? Are you just going to let the status quo stay the way it is? And they are glad when you don't kick up a ruckus. They're happy when you don't say anything because they're fine with that. They benefit from that. Are you kidding me? It's their system. It's their way. They decide on how they want the law interpreted. So it is that concern.
Do you remember the movie A Time to Kill with Samuel
Yes.
Jackson and Matthew McConaughey played the attorney, right? But there's a point where we have to understand that certain movies really say a lot of things. I'm not talking about the shooting, but when the judge asks Mr. Brigance, Matthew McConaughey's character, to come to him, to talk to him, he says, you're just going to plead him out, right? And he says, no. And he says, I think it'd be beneficial for you if you do this. So my question is, does that must happen a lot with judges and attorneys? Is that something that is not right? Is the best word I can...
Yeah, I would say yes. I'm the type of person, because I have been through so much through my candidacy to bring this to the forefront, and Marilyn Pierre has been through a lot herself too. But I'm candid about it. Yes, there are judges that engage in ex parte conversations with the decision-making authority, just like you saw in that movie. Yes, that happens. And I have heard it from other people who have witnessed the ex parte conversations. And so that is a serious concern because, number one, that conversation that judge had with the lawyer should not have been out of the presence, of the opposing counsel. And to the extent that, that conversation occurred, ethically is wrong.
But is it legally wrong? I mean,
if you're applying the professional rules of conduct and probably the code of ethics for judges, yes, it's legally wrong because those are regulations.
But don't we go back to it's code of conduct wrong, but the only person that could tell you how wrong it is the Judiciary Committee who looks at it, and again, it's probably their friends, right?
Right, and then you've got to come to realize that the like I said before, the reason why people should not assume that judges are always put into check based on the Judicial Disabilities Commission, because a lot of them still get by with that stuff. And they get by with it because A, nobody's filed a complaint. B, they did file a complaint and they dismissed the complaint. Or C, they took no action on the complaint because for various reasons. It could be that, the particular case did not have clear and convincing evidence to move it further along the path. And in some instances, they have peer reviews, and peers will flesh out those cases. So that's why it's fundamentally important that voters never, ever, ever forego or allow somebody to talk them into foregoing their rights to choose their trial court judges. That is just a serious voter suppression tactic, and it basically says you don't know what judge you need. We'll do it for you.
Okay, so you have a judge, you sit there, there's a peer review, the peers are against you, the Judicial Committee is friends with the peers that are against you, they can actually run a judge off the bench.
They could.
They've done that.
They have done that.
They have done that.
But most of the time, the case of removal is usually based on extreme circumstances. Most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time it is, but sometimes they do for like a, hey, we don't like you. Like, for instance, someone's daughter at the poll actually told my husband that, even if I get voted in, they're going to kick me out. It's such a closed process that it is, well, I should say a judge's daughter told my husband at the polls last year that even if she gets in, we're going to kick her out anyway. Like, it's her club, and only members that she wants to be part of that club gets to be part of that club. Like, we're in middle school or something like that, and we get to choose who gets to be in our club.
Well, see, that's the whole judicial nominating committee process. It's a club.
Yeah.
It's a high elite club, and who gets to join it? They pick and choose who they want in their club and who they don't want in their club.
And to make it less personal, to me, there have been some people who have done, not so bad things, who got kicked out because they were not members of that club, even though they were judges. And there have been some people who have done much worse things than those people who still remain on the bench because there were members of that club. And I think that's what Judge Barber is talking about. It shouldn't be who you know. It should be what you did and what the proper consequence of those actions were.
But you also should be about the value that you bring to the bench. That should be the driving factor as to what constitutes a good judge versus a not so good judge. What value do you bring to the bench? Do you support equity sentencing, equal access to justice, and equal justice under the law? Do you support that initiative?
Judge Friedman has a statement.
Okay. First of all, there is an element of the appointment process in the federal courts, which apparently Maryland does not have. In the federal courts, there is a hearing before the committee, a subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee of the U.S. Senate.
Yes.
In which people can come in and say that this candidate participated in the KKK event 20 years ago. So far as I'm aware, there is no such process. There is no such process in Maryland. The appointment process in Maryland.
Well, there are some situations where some judicial positions are confirmed by the Maryland Senate, and they do have hearings in that manner.
But even in that, so far as I'm aware, in the case of the circuit court judges, there is no hearing at which members of the public can say this person has taken an extreme position on the death penalty and so forth. And
there is, but it's kind of different. Like, for instance, the reason why only circuit court judges run in contested races in Maryland is because they're the only judges who are not confirmed by the Senate. The district court judges, the Court of Special Appeals, and the Court of Appeals, whatever new names they are now, I guess I'm going to have to learn them. They get confirmed, they get appointed, and they get confirmed by the Senate. The circuit court judges do not. They just get appointed, which is why they have to run in contested elections. But in terms of the public having an ability to say, hey, we don't like this person, they could send a letter to the administrative office of the courts. I just put in the chat a website for the vacancies, as well as who has applied for the vacancies and what the deadlines are for certain vacancies and who is in the pool, meaning whose name is going forward. So if Joe Public sees someone on that list and knows that this person does not have the character, the temperament, the qualifications, and so on and so forth to become a judge, Joe Public could say, "Hey, I am writing to the administrative office of the courts that to say that that letter becomes part of that person's file, so that even if the person were to move forward, whoever looks at the file could then say, oh, okay, let's look into the complaint that Joe Public had about this particular candidate to see if it's something that we should be concerned about." And there have been certain situations. I'm thinking about, oh gosh, I know his name is Beauregard. I always remember that name because I always think of, oh gosh, what's that show? What is that show? The 4 women in Florida, the older women. Thank you for being a friend.
Oh, Golden Girls.
Golden Girls.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I always think of his name because one of their boyfriends was Beauregard, and she always loved to talk about Beauregard. But anyway, I digress. This judge recently, whose name is Beauregard, I'll look it up for you as soon as I'm done. He was a state's attorney in some county in southern Maryland. The black police officers brought a discrimination case against him because the black police officer said that he was discriminating against them because they were blacks. And I thought that this was a really interesting case because usually it's the defendants who are saying, hey, by the way, this person is racist. Instead, it's the black police officers who are supposed to be helping the prosecutor. They're supposed to help each other out to get the defendants convicted. And the black police officers were like, we just want you to know that this person is racist. Now, he ended up being appointed to the circuit court by Governor Hogan, and he ran uncontested, so he is now a judge. But
15 years.
Yeah, 15 years. Exactly. Yeah, but Will, that's the sort of thing that could happen. I'm not saying that it's going to stop the wheels from turning, as we could see from Kavanaugh as well as Clarence Thomas's Senate hearings, that just because it's controversial, just because people are upset over what you may or may not have done, doesn't mean that, and it might slow down your nomination, but it seems like once these things get started, it's really, really hard to.
Did you guys ever read the story of, because Biden was on that committee, the Senate committee, when Clarence Thomas was being, and he had the power to
vote
no, and he didn't.
Right.
Well, he had the power to treat Anita Hill with dignity and respect, and he didn't even do that, which is why when he was running when he first started running, he said that he went and he apologized to her for his behavior. And
I don't care.
He said, no, you talked to me, but you never apologized. And I thought that said a lot about Biden.
Well, now history. I think that President Biden stands in the moment right now to change history and to right wrongs. If he really wanted to, he could nominate Anita Hill to the Supreme Court.
Wouldn't that be something?
And I could care less that Clarence Thomas is there, because that should not be the reason why somebody can't apply for a job.
Lynn said she got in just at the right moment.
She got there just like you got there.
Awesome.
That's called equal justice.
That would be something.
But I digress.
I think that's a really, really good point because, we hear things like, we have to try somebody middle of the road because otherwise, the other side won't agree with us. And I think because we talk about these issues, people are starting to learn their importance. For instance, I know Emily's List has been in a tizzy for the past couple of days because they're like, oh my God, the Supreme Court wants to hear an abortion case.
Yeah.
And with the 6-3 conservative majority, they're really concerned about Roe v. Wade and what that's going to mean in terms of, in terms of reproductive rights. And I myself have always thought that no matter how you feel about reproductive rights and whether, life begins at conception and all that kind of stuff, you have to think about what it means to women who are right here. For instance, when I heard that law that was passed in Alabama, I was like, oh my God, because it leaves women open to rape and other things. Because if I'm a man and I want to have a child, I just choose what woman I want to have the child with, rape her, and then she can't have an abortion. And there's no law saying that I can't have custody. So how does that protect the woman who is alive? It's amazing to me the short-sightedness that some people are thinking in terms of, oh yes, we want to protect human life. Yes, I think everybody wants to protect human life, but you just have to say to yourself, well, how do we protect all lives? Because all lives matter. It's not just the baby's right that matters. It's also, it's also the woman's life. Because if the woman is going to be pregnant, and that has happened. There have been many bills in Maryland to keep men who have raped women, who then result in the woman getting pregnant, to keep those men from getting custody of the children.
Well,
so there needs to be some protection for the women, and I don't see in any of those so-called laws.
I believe that in either this legislative session or the last legislative session, there were bills introduced that makes it a crime for a police officer to rape someone who's been arrested and in custody. I'm confused. I'm confused totally as to why you need that law.
Wait a minute. We need to make this legal.
So it's
outrageous. Outrageous.
Can I say something?
This has a question about that.
Well, I'm like, so that implies that it's already legal. That's why you need a law.
That's what it implies.
I want to share something.
A law to fix that. Oh, please! You see how crooked that's just a crooked system. To allow a law enforcement officer to get by with raping someone in custody, and you need a law to establish the fact that that's a crime. No, that's just so backwards.
I don't know. But Meekum had a question.
He's I'm there.
I can see I see you now. Okay, sorry, you have your hand raised.
No, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Judge, I can't agree with you more on this, okay? And when I got assaulted in my own house, I first called the police to file a charge against the police because I got assaulted, right? Lawfully, if you get assaulted in your house, what do? You call police, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I called 911 and they said that go to the local police station. I called local police station. They will not take. Then I wanted to talk to a surgeon. So the surgeon recorded all the conversation. Okay. And I didn't know that he was recording, but what he did was he did it with his body camera. He never said that to me, first of all. And he recorded everything and he said he's not going to arrest a police officer. Okay. Now I know there is no law that says that if somebody gets assaulted and somebody calling you for it, you don't take action because they are police officers. I went to the commissioner, district court commissioner. I was doing the charges. Then I wrote the truth. I wrote those officers who assaulted me was police officers. When the commissioner saw those as police officers, they didn't file the charges.
So Marilyn, I got a question.
They referred it to the state attorney's office. Thank you.
So the question is, Mitchum brings up a good point. What if they go into a house with a warrant that they have for a particular person? They believe is at this particular house. They rough them up until they find out by the time they get into the car, back to the police station with an ID check, it's not even the right person. What happens then?
Oh, well, I mean, just like anybody could make up. Oh, did you say they rough him up? Of course.
Well, yeah, because they take him down, they handcuff him, they really, this is a whole thing. They tear up the house, they bring him down to the police station, they're like, oh, this is not even the right guy. What happens?
Well, first of all, I'm thinking whether you have the right guy or not, that's no reason to, mess up the house and do all that kind of stuff unnecessarily. And sometimes it just seems like when you look at the wreckage, it just seems like unnecessary. And second of all, if they have the wrong person, they have the wrong person. Everybody could make a mistake, and hopefully nobody dies. And that happens. Well, I shouldn't say regular. That has happened where they have had the wrong address, or they have the right address, but they going to the wrong place. Yeah. So unfortunately, that happened.
Is there repercussions? A sorry is not going to do it, but.
Sorry is what happens in that situation. I think nowadays more and more people are being held accountable. Like, for instance, the two brothers who were recently exonerated were they exonerated or were they just released from jail? They were found not to have committed the murder that they were found guilty of. And so they left jail. But the prosecutor who prosecuted them has lost his license because he lied, and that is one of the reasons why these men were convicted. And so now there's going to be, people are looking at the consequences and saying, hey, you as a prosecutor cannot lie just because you want somebody in jail, because this is what happens. You end up having people who are innocent. And Lord, there's a difference between not guilty and innocent. Not guilty means that you were not found guilty of what you were accused of. Innocent means that you did not do the act at all. Like, for instance, you could be not guilty because of a technical error, right, or because the state just couldn't prove your guilt because they have
George Zimmerman.
Yeah, exactly.
George Zimmerman
is not guilty, as opposed to those two brothers who were actually innocent because they did not do whatever it is that they were accused of doing.
Ms. Marilyn.
Yes, Mr. Bernardi, sorry.
Oh, okay. No problem. Can I just respond to Dr. Dyer?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Dr. Dyer, I want to tell you my story. The officers didn't have a warrant, okay? They assaulted me, entered in my house, and when I asked them to leave my property, they put their feet on my door so that I cannot close my door. Mm-hmm. And they forcefully come inside and try to drag me from try to choke my T-shirt's collar, the same thing like what happened in New York, and try to pull me outside from my own house. And then my wife came from the top floor. Then they saw my wife, and they said, oh, now they are holding my hand saying that you are detained. I said, I am detained in my own house. They said, yes. And I said, you came inside my house without a warrant and I didn't give you any permission. They said, because he think I was escaping from my own house. I said, I am escaping from my own house? And the officer said, yes. And I did file a complaint to criminal charge against them, went to the district court commissioner. As I said before, I went to the police station. No, not when I filed a complaint on the phone to the police station. They denied to file charges against the police officers. Went to the district court commissioner. They denied to file charges, but they referred that to the state attorney's office. State attorney's office didn't even interview me, didn't even talk to me, didn't even see the evidences. They denied to prosecute. Then I filed a complaint to the Internal Affairs, Department of Internal Affairs. They have had a detective who was very nice, the first one. Then they changed the second detective who said 90% police shootings are justified. And I asked them, where did you get that data? And then the assistant director of the Department of Affairs said to me that there is no data, that was totally wrong. Then I request for recusal of this detective, the second detective who was assigned, and the first detective was removed. to have that either first detective or somebody else, because this is totally, to my understanding, is biased in favor of police when somebody already have 90% of says that, okay, it's justified police shooting. So
this in Montgomery County?
Yes, Montgomery County, yes. And the director said, the deputy director said she will be recommending, because deputy director was a person of color. She was a lady. Initially, when she called me, she said that she was not in favor, but after talking to me, I was able to convince her with my logical interpretation and legal interpretation. And I gave her the example of the Attorney General under Mr. Trump, who recused himself from the Russia probe. I gave that same example. So the deputy director acknowledged me and said that he's going to just run it through the director, and hopefully the director will acknowledge. But that director didn't acknowledge, said, oh, he's going to stay.
Here's a question I have for all the attorneys. When something happens that you disagree with, or something happens that isn't fair, there is a lot of money to go into to paying an attorney to fight this issue with the city and or state or whatever county. It's literally unimaginable of the price to pay. But yet, there's still a wrong, and there's no one to hold anyone accountable because we don't have the money to do it. So that's like,
I think that's part of the caste system. That's the only way I can describe this. It's a system that doesn't work for us, and what I mean by that is that, if an injustice is committed, in the situation of Methuen by law enforcement, one of the things that is happening right now is the George Floyd Policing Act that is trying to become federal law if it gets through the legislature, because it is supposed to reevaluate this whole concept of qualified immunity for law enforcement, which is what really is at the heart or the root of the problem involving Mr. Methuen's incident. Because you have this type of qualified immunity, they shuck their, they could care less if police are held accountable for making an arrest, even if the charges are dropped. And we see a lot of that. The thing that nowadays is that we're seeing so much because oftentimes, and I really genuinely believe this, unfortunately, if there were no cameras that were shown to the whole world on the George Floyd and even the Ahmaud Arbery case down in Georgia, those assailants would have still been out of jail.
Absolutely,
they would have pushed that thing under the rug.
Absolutely,
they already had the prosecutors agreeing with them on their version of the story.
Yep.
And his murder would have never ever surfaced as wrongdoing if it had not been for cameras that showed everything that, what part we do know as to how that story went down.
Mm-hmm.
You are absolutely right. If I can just finish my 30 seconds, if I may request additional, just to complete that. What happened was Internal Affairs wanted to interview us and they will not give us any copy of their records or something. And we felt very uncomfortable. So we said them, let's have everything by email. They will not listen. So we didn't go through them. So they did their own investigation. They found the officers at fault. Okay. The resolution for an assault was counseling inside my own house. So Internal Affairs found those officers guilty, but counseling was their outcome of it. And also State Attorney's Office, initially I didn't have the body camera. They told me in email saying that I was not assaulted. But when I got the subpoena with the body camera, because that also record department of Montgomery County denied to provide, then I told them that you will be contempt of court if you don't give it to me. You have a subpoena. Then they released that. And in that video, I was assaulted. It was there. And one of the surgeon even switched off his body camera, Montgomery County. That is also there. So
now here's something you should know about body cameras. The public has a right to be involved when body camera policies are established in police jurisdictions. Especially when they're being instituted, we should be able to, we should speak up and weigh in and say, whenever an officer shuts it off, then that's grounds for discipline. It could be up to termination, especially if there's a fatality. We don't want to hear your version and somebody died. We want to hear the whole body camera, how this went down. So it's accountability.
Or start having your own body camera, which is sad. That you got to have your own body camera.
No, and you are absolutely right. And after that, state attorney came back to me and said, "Oh, he touched you, but it was not an assault because he did put you in the ground, kick you, or punch you." And that's what state attorney's office. So they contradicting their own statement. Being an attorney, I am so surprised. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know. So just to answer to Dr. Dyer, without even a warrant, without having a legal reason for coming inside my house, I was not a felon, no legal jurisdiction. They found the officers at fault and they gave me a letter, both officers at fault. But what their resolution? Counseling of an assault in my own house. That is Montgomery County, Maryland. Thank you.
They're about ready to talk about putting more judges on the Supreme Court. I know this is controversial because it's not so much how many judges should be on the Supreme Court, but it still always will be the type of judges we put on the Supreme Court. What number do you guys think that the Supreme Court can go up to that just makes sense? Because
personally, I think that's just a waste of time in that argument. Not only that, but I think the Supreme Court gets so much attention that it blocks out so much of the lower courts, much of everything else that's being done. Yes, the Supreme Court is really important. I understand that. And yes, it should get some attention. But so much is not getting the air that it needs because, oh my gosh, what is the Supreme? What are these 9 people on the bench going to do? And I always find it really interesting how they're supposed to be impartial, but we already know what the decision is going to be and who's going to vote which way by the time we get that.
I just wanted to briefly share that when it comes to increasing the U.S. Supreme Court, the number of justices on the United States Supreme Court. See, I'm all focused on that righting a wrong. Those appointments under the Trump administration, especially of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's replacement, right in the middle of an election. Mitch McConnell totally contradicting himself as to why he held on to Merrick Garland's nomination and wouldn't send it to the committee and then to the floor for a vote. All of that behavior was, an ill-conceived plot to change the trajectory of the court, and that could have major consequences for cases that come to that court because these type of situations happen. From my perspective, you need more Brian Stevensons, who wrote Brian Stevenson, the one that wrote the book Just Mercy, and the one who is in charge of the Equal Justice Initiative. You need 100 of him on the bench. People like him.
But I agree with that. Oh my gosh, we need 1,000 of him. But my issue with so many discussions about the Supreme Court and how many people should be on there is that while we're having those discussions, they're putting in hundreds
of the lower courts,
federal judges at the lower level.
That's right.
And so many of those cases are not going to get to the Supreme Court, and it's going to be those lower level judges who are presiding over them. So I think that we should have a more balanced approach to, hey, yes, the Supreme Court is important. Let's talk about that. But I also want to talk about all those hundreds and hundreds of judges who get appointed on the lower court levels and on the state levels as well. Will wants to say something.
Okay. Threatening to pack the court also changes the behavior of the Supreme Court justices.
It sure does.
Huh?
Tell us more.
That's exactly right.
That happened in 1936.
It did.
See? And there's no reason to believe it won't. It could not happen again. The mere threats will push by a quote leftist unquote president will push the court to the left.
What happened in 1936?
Roosevelt threatened to pack the court.
Okay.
See, and the judges, the justices of the Supreme Court who were until Roosevelt unwilling to let, for example, Fair Labor Standards Act, all of the programs of the Roosevelt administration, they would by the old Supreme Court, the old Supreme Court would have said they were unconstitutional, and then Roosevelt threatens to pack the court. There's a great hue and cry. See, people say that's terrible. That's terrible. See, and suddenly the court starts allowing the legislation of the Roosevelt legislation. The court says that it's okay.
I'm not sure this would happen nowadays. The reason why I say that is because back then you didn't have the idealists that you have now, and you didn't have the idealists with the platforms that we have now. Because I'm looking at what's going on, because Holly's not disagreeing with me. He's not agreeing with me, sorry. I'm looking at what's going on now in terms of our former president who left, the White House. But he has so much control over the people who are still in there that I think that's a huge issue. For instance, I could not imagine a day where, Len Chaney was going to be kicked out of her leadership position.
They took that fast.
She said, but yet here she was, and she was kicked out for somebody who is, less conservative than she is. So they're willing to make these sorts of exchanges to keep people in line. And yes, I understand that, the Supreme Court justices have lifetime appointments and they're not supposed to be ideologues. But still, I'm thinking it's a little bit different from 1936, where the justices could just walk down the street and nobody would know who they were.
Well, the thing about the composition of the U.S. Supreme Court in this day and age is the fact that right now it looks like an ideologue court. There's no other way you can say it. You just have a bunch of ideologues on the bench, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's gone. Thurgood Marshall is gone. They are there no more. Their voice is not there. Their opinion writing is not there, and there's a void because they are not there. But how those positions were filled is in everybody's mind. They know of the inconsistencies and how they just bum rushed and the nomination through and robbed Merrick Garland of his opportunity to be a Supreme Court. They know that.
We have a question. The question we have is, we didn't always have 9 Supreme Court justices. Do you recall the development of the numbers? I believe it was 5. Wasn't it 5?
Yeah, well, do you remember that?
What?
I asked the question, and I don't specifically remember the development, but it seems to me over time, as the nation grew in size and population numbers, the number of Supreme Court justices similarly rose, because it's not mandated that we only have 9 justices, or we have a certain number of justices. It's a flexible number.
Right.
So I don't think there's anything holding the president back and Congress back from making more, maybe 11 justices. And I mean, I can certainly see if the shoe were on the other foot, that the Republicans wouldn't hesitate to do the same, for better, for worse. But
well, we're going to have a hard break. I'd like to thank everyone for joining You Be the Judge. We have an hour-long show every Wednesday at 6 p.m. It goes by really fast. Love to see everyone here next Wednesday at 6 p.m. We have a guest, right? Next week, ladies, right?
We don't have a guest that's been confirmed for next week yet. We have a guest on June 2nd. I cannot tell you who it is yet. She's going to be announcing her candidacy for Montgomery County Council. And then, that's June 2nd. And then on June 16th, drum roll, we're going to have the Montgomery County Executive, Mark Elrich, as our guest. And so we're hoping that everybody will join us every Wednesday, but especially on the 16th, because we want to ask Mark a bunch of questions about, his candidacy and the way that the county is being run and things of that sort. So please join us. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your input. I think it's a great conversation, and I could keep going all day, but Dr. Dyer has things to do.
There's so much to say. Yes.
So
Thank you, Dr. Dyer, for allowing us to be a part of this.
Oh, this is great. I love it. And everyone have a great night. Remember, you can always re-listen to the show on the YouTube channel, iHeart, or Apple iTunes. Just put in Bridges Live and put in the number. It'll pop right up, and you can just replay all your favorite You Be the Judge shows.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone. Have a great evening.